Hello, everyone, and welcome to my card review of the Festival of Legends set. We are doing every single class and all the neutral cards. We will be splitting them up into sections, but I'm going to talk about every single card in the expansion, as well as the various mechanics and things like that. Overall, I think Festival of Legends looks like it has a ton of really cool stuff, and I'm very excited to get my hands on it and actually get a chance to play it. The first set of the year is always kind of like Christmas for Hearthstone players, because not only is it a bunch of cool new cards you get to play with, but it's also the chance to kind of get rid of the stuff that you've been playing with for too long, right? Like all the old toys that you're bored of. Bye-bye quests, get out of here. You know, you get everything rotating, as well as the refresh of the core set and the new stuff. Always the best time, always what I look forward to the most in the year as a gamer. And yeah, we're going to jump right in and start with the Death Knight cards. I will say, before we start on the specific cards, that Death Knight is actually the class that I'm probably the most concerned about, which is to say that I feel like Death Knight was already in a really strong position coming into the end of the year, and the rotation had some of the strongest decks in the metagame, and lost precisely 0 cards outside of neutrals that every other class potentially also had access to. It's a little bit weird because the way that they did Death Knight, differently than Demon Hunter, they introduced it late in the year, which meant that they had a better sense of immediately balancing Death Knight, so it wasn't necessarily super overshot like Demon Hunter, or like really weak. It was a little bit undershot, interestingly, where they initially placed it, given the strength of a lot of the other classes, but ended up having a lot of very powerful decks in the end, and doesn't lose anything from any of those decks effectively. So it's an interesting place for Death Knight to be coming into it's effectively first new expansion. And I would expect that the Death Knight cards would generally be a lower power level than the other classes. Not necessarily all of them, but overall, just so that you don't give the most good stuff to the class that's keeping everything it already has. So let's just jump right in and talk about the cards now. With that in mind, our first card is Hardcore Cultist. This is a 1 Frost Rune card. 3 mana, 2/1, Battlecry, deal 2 damage, with Finale to all targets. For those who might not know how Finale works, Finale means that if you spend the last of your mana to play this card, you get this bonus effect. So for Hardcore Cultist, if, for instance, on turn 3, you play Hardcore Cultist with your 3 mana, you will get the Finale effect and deal 2 damage to all your opponent's stuff, which is, of course, quite powerful. However, if it's turn 4 and you don't have a way to spend the 1 extra mana, you will only be able to play Hardcore Cultist and deal 2 to something. I think this card is reasonably powerful. Obviously, the Finale effect is pretty strong. However, you already have access to Relentless Winter, and a lot of Frost Death Knight decks did not play Relentless Winter. I think that this is not something that's necessarily just going to be something you throw into each of your Frost Death Knight decks, because you don't really need the sort of 2 damage AoE unless there's popular tokens type strategies. I can definitely see this as something which is played in a metagame that does include lots of decks with a lot of small minions, but it's not necessarily guaranteed to get off the Finale effect, right? Like if you definitely want an AoE clear, you have access to other things, again, like Relentless Winter, to ensure that you're able to pull that off without either having to kind of overspend on it, like using your hero power, or just not really having the opportunity at all. It is better than Relentless Winter in a lot of Death Knight Frost decks nowadays, because they tend to play a higher minion count in order to enable things like Construct Quarter and Marrow Manipulator, as opposed to the very spell-based versions that we saw earlier in the class's life cycle, in the deck's life cycle. But I feel like a lot of people have looked at this and they're like, wow, this just like wipes out other minion decks. It's like, does it? Is it going to really replace anything in those decks? Because again, as I mentioned before, we don't really lose anything in the Frost Death Knight decks. And this is less good as just an actual offensive tool than anything that they typically have. So I would imagine this is more of a metagame call than a card that just ends up going into a lot of Frost Death Knight decks. Next up, we have Death Metal Knight. 3 cost, 3/4 taunt, double blood rune. Cost health instead of mana if your hero was healed this turn. So this is very reminiscent of Happy Ghoul. There was a time when Happy Ghoul was actually a very, very popular card in a lot of decks. Happy Ghoul was a 3/3 for 3 that was free if you were healed this turn, if your hero was healed this turn. And you saw that played in a lot of like zoo style decks, alongside even like Voodoo Doctor. That was actually a pretty powerful card because it could enable really powerful like tempo turns. This is an interesting one because this is like, okay, well, in a double blood, what are you playing? What are you actually playing alongside this, right? Like most blood decks at this point are essentially ultra heavy removal decks that kind of incidentally win the game with things like Mograine or Astalor and things like that. You don't really have like tempo plays that you're really looking to make, which is really what this is about. This is a tempo card. You're looking to use your life total as a resource to, say, obliterate an opponent's minion, heal yourself back up, life steal yourself back up with something, and then play this out for free. And, you'd really want to have, I expect, like a deck that is very tempo oriented, maybe like a hand buff, style deck that has incidental healing that allows you to play this out for free. Because it's not, by itself, like a 3-cost 3/4 taunt for 3 is not super good in the current environment, right? And it takes like kind of a lot to support this. So I feel like you need to have a balance of a deck that wants to be using its life total as a resource, has reasons to play a bunch of healing that enables this as a tempo play, which is kind of a lot of various knobs that you need to kind of get to line up in a particular game. So I feel like, given just the value of you basically get to play this for free as a tempo card, if there is a shell that can effectively use it, this could be a powerful card there. My larger question is, are there enough of those things that do line up to actually make a deck that makes this work? And right now, I'm not sure that's true. All right, next up we have Harmonic Metal. Speaking of hand buff, Harmonic Metal, 3-cost spell. Gives 4 random minions in your hand +2/+2, swaps each turn. This is part of the Harmonic Dissonance cycle. And that cycle is all cards that swap each turn in terms of their various effects. So this, for instance, is give 4 random minions +2/+2, or give 2 random minions +4/+4. And depending on where it is in its cycling through of those 2 cards, ends up working effectively with those. This, I think, is the sort of card that would go in a deck with the death metal guy we were just talking about, because this is very good at buffing things that can, have things like lifesteal, right? Like this with like Gnome Muncher, this with, the return of Ziliax, right? Any of these can be very powerful on like things that are getting these like lifesteal direct attacks in, or rush attacks and things like that, which again also support the previous card we were talking about. So that's sort of the shell that I see that card we're just talking about, the Death Metal Knight, working in. And hand buff has kind of always been a kind of mechanic that hasn't really been able to have that much success outside of like pretty narrow situations. This one I feel like is even more trouble than a lot of them, just in terms of the fact that like certain situations you very much want the very different things. Like you'd want to build a deck that usually is going to want one of the 2 of them, or at least like situationally is like, well, I really wish I had this one right now because I have 2 minions at hand, right? Like if you have exactly 2 minions and it's on this rather than the buff 2 minions, it's pretty disappointing. But I feel like there has been a decent amount of like reasonable hand buff stuff that the Blood DK already has, like Blood Tap after it got its buff. I think, outside of the fact that like, there are generally better versions of Death Knight that you can play, and pretty vulnerable to things like silence effects, which again, Shard of the Naru, I was excited to see Shard of the Naru go, as someone who likes to play things that buff all my minions up, like hand buff, and it was added to the core set. So if you're playing against Priest, for instance, your hand buff deck is likely to be very, very sad. But yeah, overall, I think that there is at least some potential for this. But again, it's a little bit unreliable because of the harmonic dissonant nature of it in terms of what you specifically want from your deck in a given situation. And again, is also quite vulnerable to a lot of situations against silence effects, which are, potentially reasonably prominent depending on what the metagame looks like. Next up, Arcanite Ripper. I like the Arcanite Reaper play. It's nice. This is a 3-cost 3/2 weapon for 1 Blood Rune. With Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 Lifesteal Undead. Change your health on your turn while equipped to improve. So that wording is very interesting. Change your health on your turn, because this isn't heal, it's not take damage. It can just be gain additional health. So specifically, one of the things I'm curious about is how this works with the card Vampiric Blood, because Vampiric Blood is a card that is gain 5 health, then you can spend 3 corpses to draw a card and gain 5 more health. Does Vampiric Blood double trigger Arcanite Ripper because it has 2 separate segments? My guess is that it does, right? Because specifically the reason I think so is the way that Void Touched Attendant interacts with Shadowward Undeath. Because Shadowward Undeath has, similarly has a clause of do this. If it says deal 2 more if an undead died, and it actually triggers like it sees both instances with Void Touch Attendant. So my guess is that this does work with that. That you can Vampiric Blood, and this will tick this up twice, which is pretty powerful. And like imagine just like Blood Boil, right? Your opponent has 5 minions in play. You cast your Blood Boil, it triggers. Every single trigger works on your Arcanite Ripper, and boom, now you have, assuming you actually, your health changes and you're not sitting there at full health, you have like a 6/6 lifesteal undead that this makes. So I think it's a pretty powerful card. I think that there's a lot of ways to trigger this. A lot of ways to trigger this multiple times with individual cards. So yeah, I think that this is a pretty powerful card that I do expect will see quite a bit of play. Even just attack into a minion with it. Boom, your health changed in your turn. Easy game. Next up, we have Cagehead. This is an 8-cost 5/1 double undead rune. Death Rattle, summon a 9/9 Blightbore with charge and taunt. So this is the weird one. Obviously, if you have things that care about Death Rattle triggers, ways to get additional Death Rattle triggers, which we will get to in a short moment, you have the ability to make multiple Blightbores. That's pretty powerful. I do like the fact that it has A, charge, and B, taunt, because if your opponent just kills this on their turn, they have to then get through the 9/9, right? As opposed to, they can just like get rid of it so you can't use things that multi-trigger it or whatever. And, obviously like, if you kill it in your turn, you can still actually make use of it by just smashing them in the face with the 9/9. That said, it feels like a pretty difficult card to build a deck largely around because A, it's very expensive, and B, it's legendary. So if you're trying to build a deck that's like specifically looking to lean on like Death Rattle triggers, like again, we'll get to one in a moment. You have to have gotten this individual legendary into play, not been dead, and then be able to do something else to take advantage of it. So it feels like it's kind of asking a lot. Let's jump to the card that I'm talking about to work with it right here, which is Bone Shredder. 5-cost 5/4. You can spend 5 corpses to trigger and gain the Death Rattle of a random friendly minion that died in this game. So the combination of Bone Shredder and Cagehead is obviously very powerful, right? Like Bone Shredder would immediately give you the 9/9 charge with taunt, and then when Bone Shredder died, you get another one. But the problem is you have to have played your 8-drop, had that 8-drop die, then play Bone Shredder, have 5 corpses, and then kill Bone Shredder, and then you have you have your 2 King Crushes or whatever. So that's very powerful, but like, how are you getting to this point in the game, right? And because it is a random friendly Death Rattle, do you have no other Death Rattles, right? Does your Bone Shredder do literally nothing unless you find your Cagehead? It just feels like, like there's a lot going on to try to actually make all of this work. Obviously, you can get the corpses just by sending in things with your hero power, but that's still spending 10 mana on your hero power before this point and still surviving and getting to that point in the game. So, I feel like that dream feels pretty tough. I think that, it's super cool when it happens, but it seems like the combination of factors that need to go into that in order to, make it work feel pretty difficult. So certainly cool, but I feel like Bone Shredder is more likely to see play in something like just a tempo Death Rattle deck, and there really aren't even that many other good Death Rattles that are cheap. If you're looking to like play Bone Shredder by itself, like the best like tempo-ish Death Rattles that cost less than Bone Shredder are things like Foul Leg, right? There really just aren't super strong options for Death Rattles. It's not really something that Death Knight has really leaned into too heavily. But we have something that can work with some of their Death Rattles. Another location, Mosh Pit. Spend 3 corpses to give a friendly minion reborn. So this obviously is just a reasonably powerful effect, but can work best with things that have Death Rattle type effects. This could be used very effectively on, say, Thessarin, right? Like, that already will have like a Death Rattle trigger, comes back from having reborn, boom, Mosh Pit it, comes back again, keep having that sort of Death Rattle effect. Thessarin, obviously something that you could use with the aforementioned Bone Shredder, but again, not a particularly powerful effect. But yeah, I think this is interesting. Not nearly as powerful as Construct Quarter, but there's a lot of room for a thing to be weaker than Construct Quarter and not be bad. But this and the Bone Shredder and obviously Cagehead do sort of lead us down a path of, hey, this is a new thing that Death Knight's kind of looking to do, which again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this whole section, I think is a good thing, because I think that giving just like more tools to the decks that Death Knight currently has can be potentially troublesome because they didn't lose any cards, right? Like more things that just go into Frost Decay or Blood Decay kind of in their natural state right now would just make those decks more powerful, and they didn't lose anything. So, I think that things that pull those decks in different directions or inspire new Death Knight decks like these Death Rattle cards are a good direction for design to go with this particular set. So I like this. I don't necessarily think that, again, it goes into anything that currently exists, but maybe pushes Death Knight in a different direction. Next up, we have Screaming Banshee. This is probably one of the Death Knight cards that I find the most interesting in this set. Screaming Banshee is a 5-cost 3/6 with lifesteal. After hero gains health, not heals, notably, gains health, summon a soul with that much attack and health. So if you play this, and you play a Vampiric Blood, and you have the corpses for your Vampiric Blood, you get 2 5/5s, right? Because you gain 5, and then you gain 5. So, boom. You play this, you play Vampiric Blood, for your 7 mana and 2 cards, you get a 3/6 lifesteal that continues to have this effect, and 2 5/5s. You can have this, you could just like equip your Corrupted Ashmorn, swing it with this in play, boom, 5/5. There's just a lot that works very, very well with this. The previous weapon we were talking about that creates a lifesteal undead. Great. Lifesteal up, play this, or vice versa. Use your weapon, get that guy, play this, attack with it, boom, get a bunch of life. There you go. So there's a number of things. This and the Death Metal Knight that want you to spend your life total pretty aggressively and play ways to heal yourself, which I like as more of a like active dynamic for Blood Decay. Like most of the Blood Decay decks that exist right now are largely just like sit back, kill your stuff, discover stuff. They don't really have a proactive game plan. They're mostly just trying to run you out of stuff and like whittle you down, which is a game plan, right? But giving you more of a game plan of, hey, I'm using my life total as a resource on things, and then I'm healing and gaining advantages for that healing is also cool. I mean, one of the really powerful things about this, like say you're playing an aggressive deck and your opponent plays this. Do you like trade into this? If you don't, they're going to just keep life stealing each turn and keep making more guys. If you like double trade into this, they gain 6 life and make 2 3/3s. So it really puts you in an awkward position, right? So I think that this is a very powerful card that will likely see a significant amount of play, and I think will kind of push Blood Death Knight decks in a very different direction. Next, speaking of, Death Growl. Once again, we have Death Rattle stuff for DK. Choose a minion, spread its Death Rattle to adjacent minions. So this is a really interesting one. This isn't like give your death rattle to everything. This is your death rattle is now goes to the things next to it for 1. So, I feel like there's certainly a lot to be said for how powerful this effect is. Say you play this with Cagehead, and have like 2 guys. Boop. Here, all of us gain a 9/9 charge taunt when we die. Obviously, that's a lot of mana, requires a very specific game state, probably much more likely to be the sort of thing that you use alongside, much cheaper things. I am quite sad to see, things like this and the Bone Shredder after we have lost my favorite death rattle of all time, Burning Blade Acolyte. Number 1 protector of the Demon Seed lifetime right here, I think. Overall, I think that this, alongside those other cards that we were discussing, definitely push for a new form of Death Knight deck. Death Knight currently does not have great death rattles in itself, but does have obviously access to all of the neutral cards. And these are the sort of cards that, even if they're not necessarily great right now, have a long time to grow in power, right? You have a long time over the course of their life cycle in the standard format to just see new death rattles being printed, whether in Death Knight or in neutral cards. So they're the sort of thing that, even if they don't just pop out of the gate and have like a powerful deck right away, you definitely want to keep them in mind when new sets are released. And lastly, but certainly not least, the Climactic Necrotic Explosion. Deal 5 damage, summon 2 1/1 souls, lifesteal, with randomly improved by corpses you've spent. So this is the Rainbow DK legendary spell, which we have gotten confirmation cannot be discovered. So there's actually a couple of the legendary spells that were removed from any kind of discover pool. But this is just like a wildly cool card, right? Like, this is, obviously the Climactic Necrotic Explosion. It's likely to end the game in some capacity, whether it's just blowing your opponent up, or it's, making a gigantic board. I believe every element of it is something that can be improved, right? Like, I think that every number, so every time you spend a corpse, one of the numbers goes up. It can be the damage, I assume the number of the souls, up to 7, and then the size of the souls up to however much, right? So, if you spent 20 corpses in a game, maybe this deals 25 damage. Maybe it's like, deal 8 damage, summon 7 4/4. That math probably doesn't add up. But, it definitely doesn't add up. But it's just a super cool card, right? That actually encourages you to, spend your corpses and play a longer game in a Rainbow Death Knight shell. But overall, yeah, super cool. I like it a lot. I think that this is obviously a very real reason to play a one of every rune Death Knight, which wasn't really supported in a meaningful way in the original release for Death Knight. I think that all of the other sort of combinations had some level of support, but now there's actual reason to play Rainbow DK other than just like getting a few of the best cards from each of them. So very cool card, and I'm excited to see people build around it. All right, next up we have DH. After DK, we have Demon Hunter. So, first things first, we have Eye of Shadow. 2-cost, 2/3 demon. Your hero has lifesteal. That's an interesting one. The ability for Demon Hunter to kill things with weapons has always been very high, but obviously you have a lot of ways to, just take a lot of damage back attacking into gigantic things. I don't really feel like you're likely to really want this in many decks, just because, you'd have to very specifically have things that you need to, in the metagame that you really specifically need to attack into that are high power. Maybe this is something that you'd rather play instead of removal spells, right? But it feels like this is probably just a neat card as opposed to a card that's really likely to change the dynamic of how you actually build your decks. All right, next up we have Security. 2 costs. Summon 2 1/1 Illidari with Rush. Outcast, summon 1 more. I like this card. I've tried to build various forms of Outcast Demon Hunter for a while. And one of the issues is that a lot of your cards just don't do anything or are vastly different in terms of when they are and are not outcast. This one is, you get one more guy, right? It's still like fine at 2. It's not great, but it's not like the difference between, say I-Beam being played for 3 or for 1, or for like, your things having their battle cry effect or not, right? So I like this general design of like, hey, Outcast is a bonus as opposed to like the way you have to play the card. We have seen the 3 mana for 3/1/1s with Rush, which wasn't really a particularly powerful card. So 2 mana for 2/1/1s comes down obviously faster, and with the Outcast getting a 3rd, I think is legitimately like potentially a pretty powerful card. So I think that the sort of token / Outcast Demon Hunter decks can both potentially use something like this. So I actually think that despite those not being decks that really have historically seen a lot of play, they have been some that I have, in both cases, tried to make work, and could certainly use a little bit of help that I feel like this actually gives them. So I like this card, and I certainly am going to try and make it work. Next up we have Snake Bite, a 2-cost 1/1 Rush Naga. Battlecry, gain +1/+1 for each minion that died this turn. Speaking of token, this is something that can be very, potentially quite strong in a token deck. The problem is it's pretty bad on its own. Like you need to have 2 things die before this is like a reasonable card, right? It is each minion, not each of your minions, right? So that is pretty, pretty significant. That is a reason that this might be a metagame situational type card. If you're, there's a metagame with a lot of small minions, and you're playing a deck that also makes small minions that you can trade with, great. You can play, say, the security, trade in 2 guys, then play Snakebite, and now you have a 5-cost Rush for 2. It feels like just the fail state of this is just so bad that against like a control deck, right, where you're unlikely to be having that many things to trade into, that you end up being in a really awkward spot. So this feels to me like more of a like really deck dependent and metagame dependent card, just because you like really need a lot of things to line up for this to be particularly powerful. Next up we have Rush the Stage. Draw 2 Rush minions. They cost 1 less. This doesn't leap out at me as being super strong, but any card that draws cards of a specific designation is a card that I think that you need to keep an eye on, right? Because maybe there's some sort of powerful combo that wants you to have specific Rush minions that line up together. I can't think of one immediately, but like this could be a powerful card in a deck that like down the line is looking to specifically play like, I don't know, 2 Illidari Inquisitors or whatever. You really need to draw them from your deck, yada, yada, yada. Your whole deck is built around those. But yeah, I mean, this is giving you card draw plus cost reduction. Those are 2 of the most powerful things in Hearthstone. So even if they don't necessarily line up immediately with like a deck right now, this is the sort of thing that you need to keep an eye on. All right, next up we have Going Down Swinging. It's a 5-cost legendary spell. Give your hero +2 attack and immune, then attack each enemy minion. So this is, a way that Demon Hunter can have a good answer to, a board full of small minions. This could be the sort of thing that you want with the guy who gives your hero lifesteal, right? And if you have things that specifically key off of attacking, like things that give you a bonus for each time your hero has attacked. Like we've lost Kurtrus, right? Like the hero card is gone, so you don't have like playing this into having like 10 power demons coming off of your Kurtrus. But if you have, things like the dude who draws a fell card every time your hero attacks, right? With this, I think that guy may have rotated, now that I'm thinking about it. But something like that, something that cares about each time your hero attacks, this could be a very powerful card with that. Right? This, and again, alongside like the thing that gives your hero lifesteal, you can chop through and just heal yourself up to full life. And you could have other things that give your hero more attack so that you can, kill even bigger things, gain even potentially more life with lifesteal guy. So it can set up to combo pretty well and pretty powerfully with a number of things. But yeah, overall, I think this is a really interesting card that likely needs other cards alongside it. It's not just the sort of thing you're probably gonna play and be thrilled with on its own, except again against specifically a metagame or boards that end up having a bunch of small minions. I guess this is actually really good against like boards full of skeletons. Like boards full of skeletons from like Mage, for instance, like Deathborn or whatever. Like you're immune this turn, and you kill all the skeletons, so you don't even take the death rattles. So there are like a lot of situations that I can think of is like, oh, this is actually going to be like pretty powerful situationally. It's not the sort of thing that you just like build your deck to do because it is fundamentally reactive, because it attacks your opponent's minions. Next up, we have Instrument Smasher. Whenever your weapon is destroyed, equip a random Demon Hunter weapon. So this is kind of an interesting card with the card we talked about previously, right? Like if you have this and you have a weapon and you play that, you'll like attack through each of the weapons. And if the weapons have like death rattle triggers or like attack triggers, you'll just keep getting them as it'll rotate through your different weapons. It's pretty neat. It's not itself a demon or anything, so it doesn't necessarily work with, I guess like most of the things that they care about, they just want to have big demons. So it's actually maybe good that it's not. But yeah, I mean, this could be something that enables you to play like a cheap weapon and then potentially upgrade it into a stronger weapon. Like the big cleave weapon is coming back, right? So being able to like play cheap, the cheap one cost stuff, like the new Outcast weapon or the weapon that damages your opponent if you attack something and honorable kill it. I guess that's going away. But cheap weapons alongside this, maybe giving you big weapons, can be pretty interesting. And it's reasonable stats, right? So if you're playing a deck that is looking to play a number of inexpensive weapons, this could potentially be a good way to take advantage of those once they're going away. Speaking of weapons, Glaive Tar. 4-cost 4/2 with Death Rattle, draw a card. Play Outcast cards while equipped to improve. This is a really powerful card. Just like a 4-cost 4/2 weapon, it's not amazing, right? But if you're attacking your opponent's face, this is, pretty powerful, right? Like you're just looking to hit them twice, and you're doing 8 damage for 1 card, and drawing a card. And if you play Outcast cards, there's a lot of cheap Outcast cards. You can play a lot of Outcast cards in a turn, right? So yeah, what improves is the death rattle, not the actual stats of the weapon. So it keeps drawing more cards. And if you're playing like an Outcast deck, you can play like the 2/1 that makes your next Outcast cost less. You play like the make your cards cost less. You play another thing that's cheap, and suddenly you play this, you swing it. The next turn you play 5 Outcast cards and you draw 6, which is pretty wild, right? Like that's a pretty like that's not an unreasonable situation to come up. It's actually a very, very reasonable thing, and it just gives you this really powerful reload along with a powerful weapon swing. So I think this card is very good. I think this card is like extremely powerful as a both sort of aggressive tool and card draw. More so obviously card draw tool. And one of the really powerful things about it, this is a death rattle effect. So like if you play this and you load it up, and your opponent just like say Vipers it, okay, you draw your cards. It's actually really strong. And you also, it's play Outcast cards, not play Outcast cards with their Outcast. You can just play them. Like if you just have a handful of cheap Outcast cards that are not in the right position and you somehow can't get them in the right position, doesn't matter. You just play them out and you draw a ton of cards. So this is, I think, just a really, really, really strong card. And I expect this to be the sort of thing that could potentially carry a deck built around Outcast cards because it is that powerful. Next up, we have Guitar Soloist. A 5-cost 4/3. If you control no other minions, draw a spell, minion, and a weapon. So this is, draw 3 attached to a 4/3 is reasonable, right? Like it's drawing specific things too. It's kind of like a Gorlock Ravager was a pretty powerful card, right? And that just drew Murlocs. This is a 4/3 that draws you a spell, a minion, and a weapon. So you do have to have like a reasonable number of weapons in your deck, or else this is going to miss on that pretty frequently. You do need to control no other minions, but if you're playing like a more like controlling version of Demon Hunter, then you're quite possibly going to have no minions at this stage of the game. So yeah, I mean, I think this is the sort of card that like maybe goes into, again, more of like a controlling Demon Hunter style deck. Because, you don't want to be like in a position where you can't afford to trade your minions away on board or whatever. I think this is not like like the sort of card that's just like, oh, this is incredible, it goes into every Demon Hunter deck. But I think that if you are playing a like non-minion based, slower, more controlling Demon Hunter deck, this is a very, very reasonable card to play. Like maybe this goes into like big Demon Hunter. I don't know what necessarily weapons you want in that deck, but like being able to get some degree of advantage off of that. The big thing is you need to have weapons. Weapons are the hardest one to kind of fit into every deck. So maybe it's like even tougher to fit into things without specifically looking at what they're going to get weapon wise. But overall, I think this is like a card that can have a home. Certainly not going to be like an all-star in a lot of different decks because of the no minion restriction, but certainly has potential. Next up, we have Halvera Darkraven. 4-cost 4/3 rush. After friendly rush minion attacks, give your minions +1 attack. So yeah. Speaking of rush minions that are powerful to draw and reduce their cost of, one of the things about a lot of these rush minions in Demon Hunter, a lot of them are created by spells. So you could play a deck that has a very low number of actual rush minions, including this, just absolutely magnify the power of your entire board. If you have like a few rush minions, like token rush minions in play to start your turn, and then you just play this, and it's like, okay, attack with this one. Now they're all more powerful. Attack with another one, all more powerful. Attack with another one, all more powerful. But yeah, I think this card is pretty strong. In particular, I think like in like a token style strategy, whether it's a like really rush focused or just like like more of a token focus, because so many of the tokens that you end up creating with Demon Hunter have rush anyway. This just feels like a very, very strong tool for those sorts of decks. So I don't know if there's not necessarily enough tools, or if the metagame will be hostile to that kind of deck. Every time that I've tried to play something like the token Demon Hunters, I get blown out by stuff like Deathborn. This doesn't really help against that because all your stuff still dies. But I think that this is certainly a major payoff for that kind of strategy that can just end up absolutely wiping out your opponents. And lastly, for Demon Hunter, Taste of Chaos. 1-cost, deal 2 damage to a minion. Finale, discover a fel spell. So Finale, again, for those of you who might not know, is if you spend your last mana to do this, you get the Finale effect. So just 1-cost, deal 2 to a minion is okay, but being able to kill something and discover a fel spell is pretty sick, right? Like kill your guy, discover something, is reasonably powerful. We are losing like Jace, for instance, I think rotates out. A lot of the sort of core of the fel stuff that was previously really powerful for Demon Hunter is going away. Most notably just Jace. However, there's still number of like powerful fel spells themselves. That's this. I think Demon Hunter probably is one of the classes that's the best at finaleing. I think this is the only finale spell they specifically have, just because they have a 1-cost hero power. So it's harder for them to be increments they can't actually hit. Like it's like, oh, I'll play this thing that costs 2 alongside my spell that costs 1 and my 1-cost hero power, and like there's just like harder for there to be holes in their mana curve because of the way that lines up, which frankly means that it probably makes sense that this is the one finale thing that they get, which feels a little bit weaker than some of the other ones we have seen. But doesn't seem like it's an all-star card, but could be a role player in decks that are looking to lean into fel stuff for whatever reason. So overall, I didn't do this for the Death Knight portion. I just ended. Overall, I feel like the Demon Hunter stuff does seem to lean mostly in terms of the interesting cards toward like token rush outcast type strategies. Much of the stuff we see here looks like it has the best chance of finding a home in those, as opposed to sort of big demon or fel spells or like relic type stuff, which is something that I find interesting because those are strategies that haven't really seen very much support so far, and I've tried to make them work, and I'm sure I will continue to do so with this new set of stuff. All right, next up we have Druid. Our first Druid card, boom, Peaceful Piper. 1-cost 1/1, choose one, draw a beast or discover one. I like this overall. in part because one of the saddest things when you have like, draw a card from your deck kind of stuff and you've run out. So it's like, I have drawn my last beast, and now I have this one that doesn't do anything. So I overall like the design direction of this. We haven't really seen a ton of stuff that like has really looked to make like a true beast druid work in quite a while. Though there are a number of really interesting beasts in this particular set that could certainly just make it worth playing this, even with a relatively small number of beasts, because they have long-term impacts. And let's just jump right to one of those. Boom, Free Spirit. It's a 1-cost 1/2 undead beast with Battlecry and Death Rattle. Your hero gains 1 more armor. Your hero power, rather, gains 1 more armor this game. So there's a whole cycle of these. Well, there's a couple of these that are basically like a new version of like Feral Druid, that rather than being a bunch of spells that give you, bonuses to attack and health like we have seen largely in the past, there are these beasts, these Free Spirit. And let's jump to the other one as well. So Free Spirit and the Groovy Cat. So this one is Battlecry and Death Rattle. Your hero power gives your hero 1 more attack this game. So ultimately, between those two, you have the ability, if they all die, that your hero power is +5 attack, +5 health from your hero power. So yeah, Battlecry, you get 1 effect. Death Rattle, you get the effect again. So each of them is +2 for the rest of the game, and you have 2 of them. So with both of those, you have +5 attack, +5 health from your hero power. So this is really powerful. Obviously, you have to draw and play and have these killed. They're really cheap themselves, so that part is easy. And then having cards, let's just go back to it, like the Peaceful Piper, to draw them is pretty powerful. So overall, like there's more of like a, hey, I'm Feral Druid in the sense that I am upgrading my hero power and actually getting in there and fighting, as opposed to, oh, I'm Feral Druid, I'm casting Rake on this, I'm playing a Park Panther, I'm like, getting my quest online. So these I think are really, really powerful. There are a lot of cards that would be amazing with these that are going away. Like Moonlit Guidance rotates out, and Moonlit Guidance with these would be outrageous. You could Moonlit Guidance and play like 2 of them every time you Moonlit Guidance, because they're super cheap, right? You can still play them stuff like Unending Swarm if you want to just keep getting more of the Death Rattles. So that there are ways that you can replicate the effect and try and get your hero power bigger and bigger and bigger, which is pretty cool. But overall, like a lot harder to do than just being able to just draw extra copies of the Moonlit Guidance. There's also a good friend for all of these in this guy, Zoc Fog Snout. 7-cost 6/6 with Battlecry. Summon 2 1/1 Quilboar with Taunt. Improved by your hero attack and armor gained this turn. So specifically, your attack gained and your armor gained. Your attack increases their attack. Your armor increases their armor. So if you, say increase your hero power so that you're getting +5/+5, this is hero power. Play this, you get to 5/5s. Obviously, you can do more than that. This does exist in the same time, or at the same time as like a Nubercon and what is the 7-cost guy, Under King. So there's lots of ways. I feel like a Nubercon into Under King into Under King into this guy. You've already gotten, and you trade off the 2 Under Kings, right? You've already gotten like a bunch of 120s or something like that, 130s, 130 taunts. So it's kind of cool. They're only 1 power unless you get some attacks some way otherwise. But yeah, I think this card does seem pretty good. Obviously, it depends on the sort of metagame that all of this exists in. But it feels like it gives Druid these plus the hero power bonuses. It feels like it gives Druid a way to like play like more like a longer game that's less focused on just like, hey, I go completely over the top of you. It's more of like, with all these hero power bonuses, I can play this like grindy game where I'm tanking up and I'm punching you, which is something that we haven't really seen out of Druid. Druid's mostly been like I go huge, and with Guff gone, you can't go nearly as big, but you do have the ability to get all this crazy hero power stuff going on, which feels pretty interesting to me. So I like that whole package. I will definitely be experimenting with it, but that's certainly not all that Druid is doing. They have stuff like this: Summer Flower Child. 5 cost 4/5. Battlecry, draw 2 cards that cost 6 or more. With Finale, they cost 1 less. This card is interesting. Obviously, being able to reduce, it's a 4 cost, or rather 5 cost 4/5, draw 2. That can reduce the cost of those things. And then also they have a number of other things that specifically care about higher cost cards, like this, the Timber Tambourine. So this is summon a 5/5 Ancient. Play cards that cost 5 or more while equipped to improve. So every time you cast something that costs 5 or more, you get another Ancient with the Timber Tambourine. So you can play this on 4, play, a 5 cost thing, swing with it, play a 5 cost thing, swing with it, boom. 3 5/5s. Obviously, those 5 cost things need to be doing something for that to actually be, remotely good enough. But it's definitely an interesting thing. This is the first Druid weapon since the Twig of the World tree that actually has attack, or just first one period, really, right? Then there's Drum Circle, 7 cost nature spell. Summon 5 2/2 treants, or give your minions +2/+4 and taunt. This one is kind of tough for me to justify. 7 is so much mana. And summoning 5 guys, the +2/+4 and taunt is pretty powerful. Like, maybe this is like the absolute top end spell of like a token deck, right? Where like, you're playing a ton of cheap things, because +2/+4 and taunt is really powerful. And if like maybe you don't have a board, okay, well I'll make a board. But like it's not even a full board. They're all 2/2s. It just feels reasonably expensive to me for, like the style of deck that typically would want this sort of thing. But maybe you use this alongside like the Timber Tambourine, right? You swing the last swing of it, and it's like, haha, now I have all these 5/5s, and it's like, boom, actually, there's 7/9 taunts. It is kind of like a Scenarius without the Scenarius itself. You're spending a little bit less mana, and you get 2/2s instead of the big body, and then you're getting +2/+4 and taunt rather than the +2/+2. Scenarius hasn't really seen play in quite some time, but yeah, I feel like this is maybe like a one of like high end of a token Druid deck is sort of what that feels like to me. It is true, the Eclipses are now in, so being able to double cast that can be actually kind of interesting too. Then we have Rhythm and Roots. This is a weird one. 4 cost spell. Summon 3 5/5 Ancients in 2 turns, or 8/8 Ancients in 4 turns. So this is 4 cost spell, do nothing. And then your opponent doesn't know which is going to happen. And then either in 2 turns you get 3 5/5s, or in 4 turns you get 3 8/8s. This does sort of fit with what I was talking about as like more of like a like grindy stall plan to the hero power buffing. Obviously, like, if you can just get some huge minions for a cheap cost, that's pretty powerful, right? Just be able to play that. Say you play that on turn 4 against like a faster deck. You want to get you go for the 5/5s. Maybe against a slower deck, you go for the 8/8s. Who knows? And then they come into play, and then you have all your mana to work with to play with them. Like, this could enable you. It's like, okay, in 3 turns I'll get 5/5s. Well, that lines up with this, with the Drum Circle. Now those 5/5s are all 7/9 taunts. Obviously, spending 4 mana and doing nothing, and having it not actually impact the board at all for several turns is challenging. But yeah, I feel like this is like an interesting card that maybe goes with, again, the sort of grindy, slower type of hero power Druid we're talking about as like just a one of, because it can be, obviously it's a one of because it's a legendary card that can give you kind of this burst that your opponent needs to deal with as you sort of grind away with the other stuff. Or again, maybe this is the sort of thing that goes into like like setting up a longer term plan in your token deck. Overall, doesn't seem like the sort of thing goes into like a traditional style of like token like rush deck because you want to mostly tempo your opponent out. They did bring back and buff Soul the Forest. Speaking of token decks, but yeah, overall probably not like an all-star card, but certainly does give you a lot for not very much mana. And next we have Spread the Word. This is 4 cost, draw 2 cards, costs 1 less for each attack your hero has. More stuff that goes into our hero power deck. I feel like the hero power deck is one that seems pretty interesting to me. I feel like building a deck that's like, the 2 hero power beasts, this guy, the 1/1 that can draw your hero power beasts, and playing like a bunch of other like discover things, card draw, and just looking to punch your opponent in the face feels sweet to me. But yeah, overall, draw them with this. Overall, I feel like the hero power stuff is very interesting to me in Druid. There is, at last, by the way, Harmonic Mood. Speaking of the stuff that can potentially support the hero power plan, this shifts between +2 attack, +4 armor, and +4 armor, +2 attack, which feels pretty bad. Either one of them is like medium. I guess +2 attack, +4 armor is pretty powerful just as a survival stabilization tool against aggressive decks, and +4 attack, maybe you just play that alongside the thing that costs 4 and draws you cards, and you punch someone in the face and continue to draw more cards. But yeah, this feels like the less exciting of those to me, considering the other ones are just so much long-term upside with improving your hero power. I think it's just okay, but I feel like there's just so many better cards that you could play than this, that the combination of, the overall power level you're getting from this, because it's actually, again, +2 attack, +4 power. If you were guaranteed to get that, is just a really powerful card against aggressive decks. But you're not guaranteed to get that because it does swap even in your deck. You don't necessarily draw it as one and it swaps each turn. It swaps every single turn, period. And frankly, this is, if it starts as this on turn 1, like, I guess turn 2, it's going to swap into the other one every single time. You'll never have the +2, +4 on turn 2, right? If I'm thinking about this correctly, right, this will always be +2 attack, +4 armor on turn 1. And then on turn 2, it will always be +4 attack, +4 armor, +4 attack, +2 armor, which means that you'll never have it in the best mode against an aggressive deck at the best time to have it against the aggressive deck. I don't know. It seems difficult to justify over a lot of the other stuff that's out there. But overall, I like the Druid cards. I definitely want to experiment with the idea of the hero power buffing stuff, because that kind of stuff is entertaining to me, especially trying to really go off with it and make my hero power give me like 1,000,000 attack, 1,000,000 health with Unending Swarm and such. And then, get gigantic things from the legendary. That just feels cool. But anyway, overall, Druid definitely is looking like a very, very different class with this expansion. The combination of, looking at these very different directions with, the hero power buff things and the play expensive things, as well as, probably most significantly, saying goodbye to Guff, really, really changes what Druid is going to look like come Festival of Legends. And I'm excited to see it because, good God, am I sick of Guff, and I'm sure you are too.